The Zereth Dominion's flagship, Vorax Pride, drifted above the smoldering remains of the human colony on Okeanos 4. Ash-colored clouds stained the atmosphere. Entire city grids collapsed into glowing veins of molten ruin. To the bridge crew, it was neither horrific nor extraordinary. It was routine. Admiral Ter Valen lounged in his high-back command chair, one claw tapping idly against the armrest. The wide arc of reinforced glass before him displayed the aftermath in chilling clarity. A subordinate approached, his voice smooth, almost eager. Surface resistance eliminated, Admiral. Orbital defenses collapsed in under 4 minutes. Casualties on our side, none. The crew burst into restrained laughter, the sound carrying the smugness of a predator's yawn. Valen didn't laugh, he smirked. Humans had always been predictable, scatterbrained, undisciplined, desperate in their defense. He almost admired their spirit, but admiration didn't save them from inevitability. Another insect nest burned, Valen said, his tone almost bored. At this rate, their species will run out of rocks to hide under. His words drew another ripple of laughter. One officer leaned across his console and muttered loud enough for the bridge to hear. Perhaps their home world is nothing but sand huts and wood fires. Primitive dwellings for a primitive breed. The Admiral's dark eyes narrowed slightly, though not in disagreement. He had seen Earth's image files before, an ocean world with temperate landmasses. A charming sphere, fragile and small. Hardly a fortress. Hardly worth true concern. On the tactical deck, Ensign Krell's monitor pulsed with a transmission fragment, faint, almost intentionally so. Admiral, we intercepted something from the surface, before collapse. Audio only. Valen gestured lazily. Play it. The bridge speakers crackled with static before a human voice emerged, steady and oddly calm despite the devastation surrounding it. Message received. Proceed with protocol. That was all. No panic cries. No desperate pleas. Just a curt acknowledgement, as if the destruction had been expected. The bridge fell into silence for a moment. Valen's second-in-command, Captain Draxus, frowned. Curious wording. What protocol could they possibly mean? Surely not surrender. They have none, Valen replied swiftly, masking his own unease. Is bluff or superstition muttered by a dying fool. Humans scatter their colonies like vermin. They always squeak before the end. Still, the Admiral found himself drumming his claw harder against the chair. The transmission had not sounded like squeaking. It had sounded like intent. Lock coordinates on their next installation, he commanded sharply. We move before they gather courage. The fleet leapt forward, engines humming like an orchestra rehearsing its finale. Far behind them, on the council world of Arakthos, the reports from Okeanos 4 were relayed with routine efficiency. The council chamber, a cavernous dome supported by crystalline spires, filled with voices that echoed with the arrogance of rulers who had forgotten what true resistance looked like. Another colony extinguished, droned Counselor Malkin, a heavy-lidded elder whose skin glittered with age crystals. How many is this now? 17 in the past cycle, answered his aide with obvious pride. The humans are crumbling. They will sue for mercy within months. A ripple of amusement swept the chamber. Mercy was a commodity rarely extended, but the notion entertained them nonetheless. The Council's consensus was already forming. Humanity was little more than a resource to be harvested, its world's raw stone to fuel Zereth expansion. Only Counselor Renith refrained from smiling. Her thin fingers tightened around the railing before her. Admiral Valen's dispatch contained an oddity. A human officer spoke before his outpost's collapse. He said, "Proceed with protocol." I wonder what protocol he referred to. Her colleagues laughed as though she had cracked a poor joke. Perhaps it was a prayer, one suggested, sneering. These mammals worship anything, weather, rocks, imaginary spirits. I would not be surprised if they muttered curses to their moons before they die. Or, another added with cruel humor, perhaps their protocol is learning how to scream more effectively. The chamber filled with mockery. Renith did not laugh. Something in that calm human voice gnawed at her. Species at the edge of extinction did not speak, as though initiating a plan. They wept, they begged, they cursed their gods. They did not sound prepared. Back on Vorax Pride, Valen's fleet approached their next target, a supposed stronghold orbiting the gas giant Morwen. Long-range scans showed defensive satellites forming a net, though their energy signatures flickered irregularly. Captain Draxus arched a brow. Their grid is faulty. Power fluctuations suggest instability. Valen leaned forward. Instability or bait. Either way, crush them. The fleet advanced. Missiles lanced through the black void, piercing satellites like brittle shells. Human frigates emerged, scattered and weak. Yet again, the resistance seemed too perfectly inadequate, too rehearsed in its failure. One enemy corvette held position longer than the rest. As Zereth plasma fire consumed its hull, its final transmission reached the bridge. Protocol secure. Data relay successful. The crew dismissed it as nonsense, another meaningless human chant. Valen, however, felt his chest tighten. Secure. Successful. Those were not the words of collapse. They were the words of completion. He silenced his doubt with discipline. To entertain fear of vermin was beneath him. Still, when the humans burned, they did not scream like vermin. They whispered as though they had lit a fuse. Hours later, as the fleet regrouped, Draxus approached cautiously. "Admiral, forgive me, but the humans, they seem less afraid than before. It is strange." Valen did not answer at first. His gaze lingered on the stars ahead, cold and endless. Finally he spoke, his voice low. "Strange, yes, but irrelevant. Fearless vermin are still vermin." Draxus hesitated, then nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. On Earth, deep within command bunkers buried beneath layers of granite and ocean, unseen figures monitored every Zereth movement. They spoke little, their words precise. Transmission chains confirmed. Decoy colonies eliminated. Phase 1 complete. And somewhere, far beyond the Admiral's perception, hidden war fleets waited in silence, engines cold, weapons dormant, until the right moment arrived. But for now, the stars still belonged to the Zereth, and Admiral Valen believed his power unshaken. His fleet glided forward, leaving behind ash and silence, unaware that the silence was chosen, not forced. The humans were not broken. They were patient. And patience was far deadlier than fear. The storm above Earth's northern hemisphere raged with a violence that would have grounded any civilian flight, yet far beneath the lightning and thunder, deep in a mountain carved into a fortress, the war room of Earth Command was eerily calm. Rows of officers sat at consoles glowing with cascading data. At the center stood General Elias Cade, shoulders squared, gaze fixed on the holographic projection of the Zereth fleet's latest maneuvers. His voice carried the same precision as the instruments surrounding him. "They've struck Morwen's colony, as expected. Transmission confirmed. Phase 1 is closed." Around him, staff exchanged brief nods. There were no cheers, no outward signs of relief. Each face carried the weight of years spent preparing for this moment. The sacrifices of Okeanos 4 and Morwen were recorded not as defeats, but as deliberate offerings, pieces in a strategy larger than any single world. Dr. Maren Holt, head of the Defense Sciences Division, leaned close, her voice pitched low. They bought the bait. Every last colony lost was a shell, a decoy engineered for this very purpose. They still don't see it. Cade's expression hardened. His eyes, cold steel beneath dark brows, revealed nothing of the sorrow pressing behind them. He had ordered millions into exile or silence. Entire families had lived and died on decoy colonies designed to fail. Every sacrifice had been anticipated, accounted for, necessary. Humanity's true strength remained cloaked, hidden in the deep shadows of space. "They'll see soon enough," Cade said. On Vorex's Pride, Admiral Valen reviewed the after-action reports with restless irritation. Human resistance continued to crumble with a strange elegance. Their colonies fell too easily, their defenses too coordinated in defeat. It gnawed at him, a thread he could not pull free from his thoughts. Yet pride was a more powerful drug than doubt, and he let it soothe him. Captain Draxus lingered at his side. "Admiral, forgive my candor, but the humans, they react oddly. Their communications never plead for mercy. Always that same word, protocol. I believe it may mean something." Valen turned, his stare sharp enough to slice. "Meaningless. Do not elevate rodents to rivals. The Zereth Dominion has stood unchallenged for 1,000 years. Do you think mammals with wooden navies and chemical rockets can change that?" Draxus did not answer. Silence felt safer than honesty. In the galactic capital of Arakthos, Counselor Renith found herself alone at the archive spire. She requested every intercepted human transmission the fleet had captured. Her colleagues scoffed, too enthralled with the Dominion's streak of victories to consider anomalies. Yet as the recordings played, Renith heard something unsettling in the human voices. Calmness. Resolve. Not the panic of prey, but the assurance of hunters setting snares. Proceed with protocol. Phase complete. Relay successful. Again and again, the words repeated. If this was superstition, it was practiced with a discipline she had never seen among dying species. Meanwhile, in Earth Command, Cade addressed his inner circle. The holographic map flared to life, displaying lines of red across the galaxy, Zereth supply routes, fuel depots, trade arteries. Each line pulsed with quiet vulnerability. "We are done hiding," Cade said. "Activate Revenant fleets." A low murmur passed through the chamber. It was not surprise but gravity. Everyone in the room had known this moment would come. They had waited decades, some their entire careers, for the chance to unmask humanity's hand. Dr. Holt placed her palm on the console, authorizing release. In the far reaches of the Kuiper Belt, in hollowed asteroids drifting like forgotten stones, massive ships stirred. They were not gleaming with ceremony, not adorned with banners. They were jagged, utilitarian, built for one purpose only, annihilation of any who threatened Earth. Engines awoke in silence, artificial minds synchronized in seconds, and fleets vanished into wormhole corridors invisible to Zereth eyes. At that exact hour, Valen's fleet celebrated what they believed another decisive victory. His crew toasted in the mess hall, raising crystalline flasks filled with bitter amber. They mocked humanity openly now, wagering how many days until Earth itself burned. Yet Valen found himself walking alone on the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before him, but something about their cold serenity unsettled him tonight. The human archives he had dismissed now haunted him. Wars fought over borders so small they could be crossed in minutes. Generations spilling oceans of blood for pride alone. Weapons built not to win, but to end all life. Weapons so final his species had never dared imagine them. He whispered to himself, almost unconsciously, what species survives this long if it was always so willing to burn itself? When Captain Draxus found him there, Valen quickly concealed his unease, barking fresh orders to press forward. Yet a seed had been planted. By dawn, the first Revenant strike fell. On a fringe supply depot orbiting the Zereth world of Velith Prime, watch officers observed what they thought was a sensor malfunction. One moment the screen displayed empty void. The next, 30 human warships materialized silently within the orbital perimeter. They opened fire before the alarm even sounded. Precision strikes shredded fuel silos, ruptured command towers, severed communications arrays. Within 9 minutes the depot was gone, its wreckage drifting like shattered bone. Not a single human vessel was lost. Velith Prime's governor transmitted a desperate warning to the council. His final words before comms died were clear. They knew where to strike. They knew everything. Admiral Valen's heart clenched when he received the report. Rage consumed the bridge. Draxus muttered something about ambush tactics, but Valen heard only the pounding of his pulse. He knew the truth. Humans had not been caught off guard at all. They had been preparing. Back on Earth, General Cade stood at the observation window of the bunker, though nothing but reinforced steel lay beyond. His reflection stared back at him, gaunt and resolute. "We gave them every chance to overlook us," he murmured to Holt. "We endured their raids. We let them believe we were scattered and weak. But they mistook restraint for inability." Holt answered softly, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. "And now?" Cade's lips pressed into a line. "Now they learn what it means when humanity stops pretending to be harmless." In that moment the war shifted. The Zereth still believed themselves masters, but a fracture had opened. The Dominion had unleashed something it did not understand. The humans were not merely defending. They were orchestrating. Renith felt it as she read the latest reports, her colleagues still laughing at the supposed malfunctions, the isolated raids. She saw the pattern, the precision. Fear gnawed at her heart. She whispered words none of her peers would dare utter aloud. This is not desperation. This is strategy. Above the Dominion's throne world, banners of conquest still rippled. But in the darkness beyond their reach, humanity had begun to move, and the galaxy had never known a predator so patient. The stage was no longer about survival. It was about dominance. And every quiet, calculated strike was a promise of something far greater yet to come. The council chamber of Arakthoz glowed with crystalline brilliance, yet the air was heavy with unease. Rows of counselors, their jeweled skin reflecting fractured light, muttered over reports of sudden human incursions. The Zereth Dominion had not faced humiliation in centuries, but now words like ambush, sabotage, disappearance laced every briefing. Pride clashed with dread in the Great Hall, and the fracture was widening with every passing cycle. Counselor Malkin slammed a clawed hand against his dais, the sound echoing like a whip crack. These are isolated accidents. Raiders, nothing more. Our fleets remain intact. Our world stands strong. You would have us tremble over mammals with stolen weapons. Renith rose slowly, her tall frame rigid with restraint. The chamber's light caught in the hollows beneath her eyes. Nights spent combing intercepted transmissions had carved away her composure. Accidents. Then why do they strike with precision? Why do they know which depots to burn, which routes to sever? Tell me, Malkin, what raider navigates wormholes with flawless accuracy? Mocking laughter rippled across the chamber. One counselor sneered. Perhaps they learned by watching our supply ships, like vermin stealing crumbs from a banquet. Renith's voice cut like a blade. Vermin do not dismantle fortresses without warning. They do not erase fleets in the dark without leaving a trace. Silence followed, thin and sharp. For the first time, some among them shifted uneasily. Yet pride was a poison too deeply drunk to abandon. The council preferred to sneer than to admit fear. Far across the stars, Admiral Valen stood in his private quarters aboard Vorax Pride. The chamber was vast, lined with trophies from conquered worlds, shattered weapons, banners torn from palaces, the bones of vanquished predators. Yet tonight, his trophies mocked him. They whispered that his victories had bred complacency. His claws dug into the edge of his command table as he replayed, again and again, the human transmissions. Phase complete. Relay successful. Proceed with protocol. He closed his eyes. Those voices carried no fear. They carried inevitability. Draxus entered quietly, the door sliding shut behind him. His captain's uniform was immaculate, yet his face carried the fatigue of doubt. Admiral, more reports. Another depot lost. This time near Rollins Gate. No survivors. Valen turned, his voice low and sharp. How many ships? 30. Not even damaged. They arrived, struck, and vanished. The Admiral exhaled slowly, a sound more like a growl. Do you see, Draxus? This is not improvisation. This is doctrine. They are fighting a war we do not understand. The younger officer hesitated, then dared to voice the question that lingered in his mind. And if we do not understand it, Admiral, can we win it? Valen did not answer. The silence was its own reply. In the shadowed halls of Earth Command, General Elias Cade received the latest intelligence feeds. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching as red lines blinked out on the galactic projection. Zereth's supply arteries, once sprawling and arrogant, were collapsing like veins cut open by a surgeon's knife. Dr. Marin Holt entered, exhaustion etched deep into her features. Another depot neutralized. That makes 6 this week. Their fleets scatter, but it won't be long before the council stops mocking and starts listening to their fear. Cade's gaze remained fixed on the map. Let them. The longer they argue, the less prepared they'll be when we close the fist. Holt studied him for a moment. You speak of fists, but I wonder, when this is done, what will be left of us? We've lived in shadows, sacrificed our colonies, hidden our true hand. Humanity may win this war, Elias, but will it still be the same humanity we swore to protect? He turned to her, his expression hard but not without sorrow. We stopped being the same the moment the first Zereth warship scorched our soil. War doesn't change us, it only reveals what we've always been willing to do. She did not argue. Some truths required no debate. Back on Arathos, Renith demanded access to the archives during an emergency council session. Against the groans and scoffs of her peers, she projected human history across the chamber's dome. Grainy recordings of trench warfare, mushroom clouds rising over ruined cities, fleets burning at sea. The alien counselors recoiled at the sheer scale of human self-destruction. Look at them, Renith hissed. These are not innocents fumbling in darkness. They have lived with war in their blood since their first kingdoms rose. They perfected slaughter long before they reached the stars. And now they aim it at us. The chamber fell into stunned silence. For the first time, the council did not laugh. Malkin broke it with forced bluster, though his voice lacked conviction. These are ancient relics. Brutality of the past. They cannot replicate such horrors now. Renith's gaze pierced him, then explained the fleets vanishing in silence. Explain the depots shattered with surgical precision. You mistake restraint for weakness, and they will bury us for it. Her words settled like ash, bitter and undeniable. The chamber, once a theater of arrogance, now throbbed with a quiet dread. Admiral Valen received word that the council debated surrender negotiations. He stared at the message for a long moment, then crushed the console in his claws. Surrender to them? To vermin who should not even stand in our presence. Yet even as he spoke, he tasted the bitterness of doubt. Later that night, alone in the observation deck, he replayed the human war archives Reneth had shared with the council. The images burned into his mind, men charging into machine gun fire without hesitation, cities enduring bombardment and still rebuilding, soldiers smiling in mud while death reigned around them. He could not fathom it. A species that lived with destruction so intimately might never yield the way others did. He whispered to the void, though no one heard, perhaps we were wrong. On Earth, Cade convened his generals. The revenant fleets had exceeded expectations, but he knew the council would soon unite in desperation. The window of advantage was narrow. He lifted his chin, the weight of command pressing on him like an iron mantle. The enemy begins to fear us, he said, but fear alone will not end this war. They must be broken, not in body alone, but in spirit. When their council sits in silence, when their fleets refuse to launch, when their soldiers surrender before the first shot, then we will know it is finished. The room fell into heavy quiet. Every officer there understood what it meant. Escalation no longer mere raids, but full confrontation. Dr. Holt's voice was steady, but tinged with unease. And if breaking them breaks us too? Cade's eyes were cold as stone. Then we endure, because the alternative is extinction. The decision rippled outward. Human fleets massed in silence, wormhole drives pulsing with power. The trap that had been patient for so long now began to close. And in the heart of the galaxy, the Zereth Dominion, once untouchable, once invincible, began to fracture under the weight of its own fear. The council's debates grew louder, their fleets more hesitant, their pride dimming into dread. The war had shifted from raids and whispers to something larger, inevitable. The next move would not merely sting. It would shatter. And every leader, human and Zereth alike, felt the storm gathering. The stars above Velith Prime shimmered with deceptive calm. A jeweled veil stretched across endless black. Beneath that serenity, fleets prepared for slaughter. The Zereth Dominion, once arrogant in their supremacy, had gathered what remained of their grand armada. Hundreds of warships hung in tight formation, their hulls bristling with weaponry, their captains burning with desperation more than pride. At the center, Admiral Valen stood on the bridge of Vorax Pride, his claws clenched so tightly around the railing that the metal creaked. For the first time in his career, he did not feel assured by the sight of Zereth's strength. Numbers no longer brought him comfort. He knew, as surely as he knew the rhythm of his own heartbeat, that the humans were coming. On Earth, General Elias Cade prepared his people for the final strike. He stood before his command staff, the room silent save for the hum of deep Earth generators. His uniform was immaculate, though his eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights and the burden of every life already lost. "This is the endgame," Cade said. His voice was steady, unshakable. "They've gathered everything they have at Velith Prime. It will be their last stand, and it will be their last mistake." Dr. Marin Holt studied the holographic projection. Red markers indicated the sheer mass of Zereth ships, more than 3 times the human fleet. Her throat tightened, but she forced her voice to remain calm. "Numbers alone don't win wars. We've proven that already. But Elias, their desperation makes them dangerous. This won't be a battle. It will be a storm." Cade met her gaze. "Then will be the thunder that ends it." The revenant fleets stirred. Wormhole drives flared open like ruptured stars, tearing silent wounds into the void. One by one, the human ships emerged, not with fanfare, not with ceremony, but with precision and terrifying calm. Autonomous strike wings formed instantly, coordinated not by shouted orders, but by years of encrypted programming and ruthless doctrine. The humans did not arrive as an army. They arrived as inevitability. On the bridge of Vorax Pride, alarms screamed. Officers scrambled to lock firing solutions, their faces tight with fear. Draxus turned to Valen, voice hoarse. "Admiral, they're everywhere. They've surrounded us before we even registered their approach." Valen's eyes widened. For the first time in his life, he saw his fleet not as hunters, but as prey caught in a tightening net. Hold formation, he barked, though his voice cracked. We are the Dominion. We do not break. The first volley shattered his words. Human torpedoes slipped through Zereth shields as though they had been designed for them, and perhaps they had. Ships erupted into flame, their wreckage scattering across the void like brittle glass. The Dominion responded with ferocity, lancing beams and barrages tearing into the human lines. Some ships died, yes, but the humans did not falter. For every vessel lost, 2 more slipped through wormholes to strike at new angles. Valen staggered as another shockwave rattled the bridge. They fight like no one else, he muttered, almost to himself. Not for glory, not for conquest. Only for conclusion. On Earth, deep in the bunker, Cade listened to the unfolding battle through the reports streaming across his console. His face remained carved from stone, but when Holt whispered, "They're winning," his shoulders sagged ever so slightly, not in relief, but in grim confirmation. They were always going to win, Cade said softly. The question was only how much of us it would cost. Above Velith Prime, the cost became clear. Zereth ships died in clusters, their formations dissolving into chaos. Human AI fleets cut through their flanks, striking depots and carriers before they could launch reinforcements. Each maneuver was executed with chilling precision, not rage, not triumph. The humans fought as though they had already written the end, and were simply enacting it line by line. Draxus clutched the railing, his voice breaking. "Admiral, our lines are gone. We have no retreat path. What do we do?" Valen stared at the tactical display, his throat dry, his pride bleeding into dust. The recordings of human history replayed in his mind, endless wars, endless resilience, endless will to rise from ashes. For the first time, he understood the truth. The Zereth had not miscalculated humanity's strength. They had miscalculated their nature. "They endure everything," he whispered, horror lacing every syllable. "And then they strike back." When Vorik's pride shuddered under the force of a direct hit, Valen did not issue more orders. He sank slowly into his chair, the weight of inevitability crushing him. Around him, his crew screamed, their pride stripped bare, their fear laid raw. In less than 3 hours, the greatest fleet the Zereth Dominion had ever assembled was gone. Not scattered, not retreated, gone. Wreckage drifted silently above Velith Prime, a graveyard of fire and twisted hulls. Human ships glided through the wreckage, unchallenged, their weapons quiet, their purpose complete. On Earth, the war room did not erupt into cheers. There were no raised fists, no cries of victory. Officers sat in silence, absorbing the enormity of what they had done. Cade closed his eyes briefly, then straightened, his voice low but resonant. "Transmit to the Dominion. Surrender terms are offered. There will be no occupation, no destruction of their worlds, if they accept. If not, we return." The message spread across the galaxy like a tidal wave. On Arakthos, the council chamber was paralyzed. Some counselors wept openly, others sat frozen in disbelief. The silence was absolute, broken only when Renith whispered, "They don't want our destruction. They want control. And they already have it." Admiral Valen lived, his flagship crippled but not annihilated. When captured, he expected execution. Instead, he was brought before a human delegation, where General Cade himself regarded him across the table. "You fought with pride," Cade said, his voice heavy with sincerity. "But pride is why you lost. We don't want your extinction, Admiral. We want your silence and your cooperation." Valen stared at him, baffled. "You would spare me." Cade leaned forward. "We don't need another martyr. We need someone who understands what fear feels like now. You'll serve as liaison to your people. Not because we trust you, but because they still do." The Admiral lowered his gaze. In sparing him, the humans had won more than his defeat. They had taken the last ember of his pride and turned it to ash. Later, in the bunker, Holt approached Cade as the final reports came in. "It's over," she said. Cade shook his head. "No, it's begun. The galaxy thought us weak. They mistook our patience for passivity. They will never make that mistake again." He turned to the projection of the stars, each one a potential battlefield, each one now aware of Earth's shadow. His voice was quiet, almost mournful but unyielding. "We never wanted this war. But now that it's here, we will carry its memory. And so will they. Forever." The stars glimmered cold and distant as though listening. In that silence, a new order had been born, not of celebration, but of inevitability. Humanity had risen, not triumphant, but awakened. and the galaxy itself trembled at the knowledge that Earth would never be underestimated again.